In this class, let us start our discussion about peptic ulcer. And this peptic ulcer, I have divided this class into two parts. In the first class, I will not discuss about any drug per se or any drug class individually. This first class, I will basically focus on what actually peptic ulcer is, what are the causes of peptic ulcer, types of peptic ulcer, and then we will see what is the basic pathophysiology of peptic ulcer. Because once you know why peptic ulcer is happening, what are the pathophysiological aspects involved in this, then you can easily understand the pharmacology of peptic ulcer. So always remember 3P: physiology, pathology, and pharmacology. These 3P are the base of most of the clinical subjects like medicine. Medicine you cannot understand well if you don't have a solid base of physiology, pathology, and pharmacology. And in pharmacology, that's why I always start with the pathophysiological aspects of disease, and then we try to elaborate the drug targets based on those pathophysiological aspects. So in this class, we will understand the pathophysiology of peptic ulcer, and we will see how we can treat peptic ulcer. What are the strategies that we can adopt to treat peptic ulcer, or what are the drug targets that we can think of for treating peptic ulcer? Because if you just go and start reading about the drugs without knowing about the pathophysiological aspects of peptic ulcer, you cannot understand about the individual drugs. So along with the pathophysiological aspects of peptic ulcer, you also need to know about the normal physiology of gastric acid secretion. I hope all of you have read about the normal physiology of gastric acid secretion. That will also help you in understanding about the drug targets for peptic ulcer. So if I ask you what actually peptic ulcer is, now there is one broad term that we sometimes come across is known as acid peptic disease. Now what is this acid peptic disease? It is basically a collective term, and it includes various diseases such as peptic ulcer disease, the gastroesophageal reflux disease, hyperacidity, Zollinger-Ellison syndrome, or drug-induced ulcer such as peptic ulcer due to the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, or stress-induced ulcer. So for all these terms, we use a collective word, that is acid peptic disease. Now in this, peptic ulcer disease comes. Now peptic ulcer disease can further be of various types. Now before understanding about peptic ulcer disease, what actually is peptic ulcer? Peptic ulcer is basically a localized lesion of the mucous membrane of the upper part of the digestive tract. So the localized lesion is in the mucous membrane of the stomach or duodenum, and it usually extends through the muscularis mucosa. And if this ulceration, if it is in the lower part of esophagus, we call it as esophageal ulcer. If it is in the stomach, we call it as gastric ulcer. If it is in duodenum, we call it as duodenal ulcer. And if it is in Meckel's diverticulum, we call it as Meckel's diverticulum ulcer. Now, if I talk about gastric ulcer and duodenal ulcer, which one is more common? Yes, duodenal ulcer is more common. In fact, it is 5 times more common than the gastric ulcer. And if I ask you about the exact site wherein the duodenal ulcer occurs mostly, yes, it is mostly occurs in the duodenal bulb or the pyloric junction. And as far as the gastric ulcer is concerned, majority of them occurs in the antrum, and few percentage of the gastric ulcer usually occurs at the junction of the antrum and fundus of lesser curvature. Now, what is gastritis? Gastritis is usually a precursor of peptic ulcer disease, but in a clinical scenario, clinically, it is very hard to distinguish between gastritis and peptic ulcer. Just on the clinical sign and symptom, it is very difficult. So we can say gastritis as a precursor to the peptic ulcer disease. Now let us understand the pathophysiology of peptic ulcer disease. Now if I ask you, normally gastric acid is secreted in the stomach. Now if gastric acid is secreted in the stomach, then stomach should normally get destroyed by the effect of gastric acid. Why it doesn't get destroyed? So the thing is, there is usually a balance between the aggravating factor and the defensive factor, and because of that particular balance, the stomach usually is not destroyed. But if that balance is lost between the aggressive factor and the defensive factor, then usually we get gastritis, which is usually a precursor to the peptic ulcer disease, and then peptic ulcer disease happens. Now we were talking about the aggressive factors and the defensive factor. So one aggressive factor that we can easily understand is the gastric acid. What are the other aggressive factor? Yes, yes, very good. So normally we have the gastric acid, then pepsin, then H. pylori. Then there are other factors that we will discuss, like drug-induced non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, or steroid-induced or stress-induced. Then to counteract the aggressive factor, we have the defensive factor. So what are those defensive factors? Yes, very good. Bicarbonate, then thick mucosa, mucosal blood flow, and above all, you should not forget the role of prostaglandins. Because while we were discussing about non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, before that we discussed about the normal role of prostaglandins. We saw that prostaglandins have got a very good role as far as protection of the gastric mucosa is concerned, because the first thing that prostaglandin does, it basically inhibits the gastric acid secretion. So by this action itself, it is basically uh, counteracting the aggressive factors. Then the other thing that prostaglandin does, that it increases the mucosal secretion and bicarbonate production, and also it enhances the mucosal blood flow. So normally, as we have discussed, there is a balance between the aggravating factor and the defensive factor. Now, in which scenario this balance will be tilted or this balance will be lost? Yes, in certain scenarios wherein if there is a very high gastric acid secretion, it can be like drug induced, it can be, in some cases it can be due to the H. pylori, or sometimes it can be lifestyle induced. It can be due to increased intake of alcohol, smoking, irregular food habits. So that's why, because certain lifestyle factors have got a role to play in the causation of peptic ulcer, it is always told that patient education is a must as far as treatment of peptic ulcer is concerned. Because half of the problem you can solve if you can counsel the patient regarding his lifestyle modification, or if you can advise the patient that you need to have certain modification in your lifestyle, then you can easily treat peptic ulcer to an extent. So in peptic ulcer disease, there is an imbalance between the aggressive factors and the defensive factor. So the balance is tilted towards the aggressive factor. So as far as treating the peptic ulcer is concerned, one thing I have told you, we need to educate the patients. Then the other thing is that we need to decrease the aggressive factors. If there is hypersecretion of gastric acid, we need to counteract that. Or if there is decrease in defensive factor, we need to increase that. Say for example, if there is impaired secretion of prostaglandins, we need to take care of that. Now we were talking about the role of lifestyle as far as causation of peptic ulcer is concerned. We talked about irregular food habits, we talked about the alcohol, we talked about smoking. In cases of severe physiological stress, such as in burns, CNS trauma, surgery, even in severe medical illness, peptic ulcer can happen. And there is one syndrome which is known as Zollinger-Ellison syndrome, which is basically a hypersecretory state. This can also lead to peptic ulcer disease. We talked about the role of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. We will elaborate it further just after a few minutes. But let us focus on one factor, H. pylori, Helicobacter pylori. Now, what is the role of this H. pylori in the causation of peptic ulcer, and how it causes or how it aggravates the peptic ulcer disease? You must have read about these things in microbiology. H. pylori is a gram-negative rod, and normally it colonizes the gastric epithelium. Now, what it does? It basically synthesizes urease. Now, this urease, what it does? It produces ammonia, and ammonia actually damages the gastric mucosa. Okay, so one thing that is happening is that H. pylori is producing urease, and urease is producing ammonia, and ammonia is basically damaging the gastric mucosa. The other thing that ammonia does, ammonia also neutralizes the acidic pH. Now, if ammonia neutralizes the acidic pH of the stomach, it will allow the microorganism to grow in the stomach. So, because of this particular reason, H. pylori, if you analyze a case of duodenal ulcer, up to 90 to 95% of the cases of duodenal ulcer is due to H. pylori. So if you can rule out, say for example, a patient has come to you with signs and symptoms of peptic ulcer disease, and if you can rule out that a drug is not a factor behind its peptic ulcer, so in 90 to 95% of the cases of duodenal ulcer, you can be very much sure that H. pylori is the factor that has led to this peptic ulcer disease. Whereas in 75 to 80% of the cases of gastric ulcer, H. pylori is the causative agent. So if the patient has a duodenal ulcer and if you have ruled out the drug factor, that is the patient is not taking non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug for a very longer period, you can assume that this particular case of duodenal ulcer is due to H. pylori, because 90 to 95% chances are that a case of duodenal ulcer has happened because of H. pylori. And you can know the status of H. pylori in a patient either by the rapid urease test or by the histological test or by the culture. The second thing that you should look after is to know about the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug status in a particular patient, because chronic use of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug has been found to be one of the common factor as far as causation of peptic ulcer disease is concerned. Now, how this non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs leads to peptic ulcer? Yes, because they block the prostaglandin synthesis. Now, while we were discussing about the aggressive factor and the defensive factor, or aggravating factor and defensive factor, we had seen that prostaglandin is one of the defensive factor. And how it plays the role of defensive factor, because first thing that it was doing, that it was inhibiting the secretion of gastric acid. Apart from that, it is increasing the mucosal blood flow, it is increasing the mucosa secretion, bicarbonate secretion. So if a drug blocks the prostaglandin synthesis, then it is basically blocking one of the major important defensive factor. And some patient population is more susceptible to this particular side effect of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs than the other. Previously, when we were discussing about non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, we told you that certain drugs such as aspirin, which is an irreversible non-selective non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, though it gives cardio protection at the lower doses, but the chances of gastric ulcer or GI side effects are more with drugs such as aspirin, or it is also more with the non-selective non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs such as ibuprofen. But if you go to the other spectrum, that is COX-2 selective, with the COX-2 selective drugs, the chances of GI side effects are low, but there are certain disadvantages with the selective COX-2 inhibitor, particularly the increased risk of cardiovascular events. So you have got advantages as far as disadvantages with these classes of drugs. Now we have understood the basic pathophysiology of peptic ulcer disease. Now if I ask you to devise a strategy for treating peptic ulcer, what strategies you will think of? See, just always think about that normal balance between aggravating factor and defensive factor. And in the peptic ulcer, the balance is tilted towards the aggravating factor. So you need to counteract that aggravating factors, and you need to pump up or boost the defensive factors. And also you have to think about from the perspective of H. pylori also, because H. pylori, particularly in cases of duodenal ulcer, 90 to 95% of the cases of duodenal ulcer is because of H. pylori. First thing that you can do, you can inhibit the gastric acid secretion. The second thing that you can do, you can neutralize the gastric acids by using antacids, or if ulcer has formed, you can use the ulcer protective agents such as sucralfate, or you can use prostaglandin analogs, because prostaglandin have got a very good role to play as far as the defensive factors are concerned, or you can target the H. pylori. So for targeting H. pylori, you have various antimicrobials such as amoxicillin, clarithromycin, metronidazole, tinidazole, tetracyclines. So first class of drugs for the peptic ulcer disease, which basically inhibits the gastric acid secretion. In this class of drugs, we have proton pump inhibitors, omeprazole, pantoprazole, esomeprazole, lansoprazole. Then we have H2 receptor blockers such as ranitidine, cimetidine. Then we have antimuscarinic drugs or anticholinergic drugs such as pyrangiepine, telangiepine. Now, before understanding about these drugs that inhibit gastric acid secretion such as H2 receptor blockers or proton pump inhibitors or anticholinergic, let us just quickly revise the basic physiology of gastric acid secretion, because if you recollect the basic physiology of gastric acid secretion, you can easily understand the action of proton pump inhibitors or anticholinergics or H2 receptor blockers. Because what are the role that proton pump plays in gastric acid secretion, or what role acetylcholine plays in gastric acid secretion, or what role H2 receptor or histamine plays in gastric acid secretion, you must know before knowing further about these classes of drugs. Now if I ask you cell which cell secrete gastric acid? Yes. So parietal cell has a pump and through that pump it will eliminate the H plus ion out and will take K plus ion inside, and this pump is known as H plus K plus ATPase, and in short we also call it as proton pump. Now this parietal cell acid secretion, if you go further into this, the H plus is produced through the action of carbonic anhydrase, which produces carbonic acid from the CO2 and H2O. And what this H plus K plus ATPase does, it usually pumps the H plus ion from the cytoplasm into the stomach lumen in exchange for the K plus. And then this H plus combines with the chloride ion to form HCl, which is secreted into the gastric lumen. So we have a terminal enzyme which is proton pump, or which is also known as H plus K plus ATPase, which secretes H plus ion in the apical canaliculi of the parietal cell. And this proton pump, if you see this picture, this proton pump can be activated by either histamine or acetylcholine or gastrin via their own receptors, which is located on the basolateral membrane of these cells. So gastric acid secretion, overall if you see, it is a very complex and continuous process, and various factors play a role into the gastric acid secretion. We have such factors such as acetylcholine or histamine or gastrin. All these factors play a role in the secretion of gastric acid. And the receptors for acetylcholine or histamine or gastrin are located on the basolateral membrane of the parietal cell in the body and fundus of the stomach. Now let us first understand about the gastric acid secretion. If I ask you broadly, how many phases of gastric acid secretion is there? Cephalic phase is there, gastric phase is there, and then intestinal phase is there. Now after cephalic phase there is a gastric phase. Now this gastric phase of the secretion is actually driven by the amino acid and the peptides in the food, which directly stimulates the G cells of the antrum to release gastrin. Now if you see this picture, when gastrin is released, what this does, gastrin binds to the parietal cell receptors, and once gastrin binds to its receptors, what it does, it increases the cytosolic calcium level, and this increased cytosolic calcium level, what it will do, it will stimulate the protein kinase, and this stimulated protein kinase will promote acid secretion through the proton pump, which is also known as H plus K plus ATPase pump. So gastrin binding to its receptor, leading to increased cytosolic calcium. This increased cytosolic calcium is activating the protein kinase, and then activated protein kinase is activating the or promoting the gastric acid secretion through proton pump. Okay. Now, one more thing that you need to understand, in the close proximity of the parietal cells, there are ECL cells. ECL cells are also known as enterochromaffin-like cells. In short, we call it as ECL cells. Now, this ECL cell, it also possesses the receptor for gastrin. Now we have seen gastrin can directly bind to its receptor on the parietal cell, and then it can increase the level of cytosolic calcium, and this increased cytosolic calcium can activate the protein kinase, and this activated protein kinase then activate the proton pump and ultimately releasing the gastric acid. And this enterochromaffin-like cells or ECL cell, it also possesses the receptor for gastrin. And just remember, this ECL cells, these are also the main source of histamine release. Now, how histamine activates the gastric acid secretion? Now, we have seen the role of gastrin in the stimulation of gastric acid secretion. Now, what role does histamine play in the secretion of gastric acid? Once histamine is released, it binds to the H2 receptor, and this binding of histamine to the H2 receptor, it activates the adenyl cyclase, which in turn will increase the cyclic AMP. So this cyclic AMP, what it will do? It will activate the protein kinase, and this activated protein kinase, then it will stimulate the proton pump to increase the gastric acid secretion. So what difference you are noticing as far as the action of gastrin and the action of histamine is concerned? Gastrin, what it was doing? Gastrin was causing an increase in cytosolic calcium, and this increased cytosolic calcium was activating the protein kinase, and this activated protein kinase was activating the proton pump, which in turn was increasing the gastric acid secretion. But this histamine, what it is doing? Histamine is binding to the H2 receptor, and it is increasing the level of cyclic AMP, and this cyclic AMP is activating the protein kinase, and this protein kinase is then activating the proton pump, and gastric acid is being secreted. So you must have understood the role that histamine plays in the gastric acid secretion. Okay. Now let us understand about the role of acetylcholine in the secretion of gastric acid. The muscarinic and the gastrin receptors appear to function through the phospholipase C IP3 DAG pathway that mobilizes intracellular calcium. Actually, once acetylcholine binds to its receptor, it through their GQ phospholipase C IP3 DAG pathway, it ultimately increases the level of cytosolic calcium. And again the same thing is happening. This increased cytosolic calcium is activating the protein kinase, and then ultimately proton pump is getting activated and leading to gastric acid secretion. Now, while I was talking about the drug targets or the strategies for treating peptic ulcer, I told you about decreasing the aggressive factor and promoting the defensive factor. Now, as far as decreasing the aggressive factor is concerned, what we have seen, one drug class is a drug class which decreases the gastric acid secretion. In that we have seen three drug classes. One was proton pump inhibitor, another was H2 receptor blockers, other was anticholinergics. Now you can easily understand, either you can directly block the proton pump. Okay, if you can block the proton pump, then you can directly inhibit the gastric acid secretion, or you can block the histamine induced gastric acid secretion, or you can block the acetylcholine induced gastric acid secretion. Now, as far as the action of acetylcholine through its receptor is concerned, both M1 and M3 are involved, but acetylcholine released from the postganglionic vagal fiber can stimulate the gastric acid secretion either directly by activating the muscarinic M3 receptors or through activation of M1 receptors present in ECL cells. Okay. So till now we have talked about proton pump inhibitors, how proton pump inhibitor will help, or we have talked about the anticholinergic or antimuscarinics. We have talked about histamine receptor blockers or H2 receptor blockers. So basically we are counteracting the aggravating factor or aggressive factors. The other aspects we should also think about. The other aspect is, earlier we were talking about the role of prostaglandins. Prostaglandins have got a very good role to play. Prostaglandin, in that particular pathway that we were discussing, prostaglandin actually inhibit the gastric acid secretion because it actually inhibit the cyclic AMP. What we were seeing that histamine was actually increasing the cyclic AMP, and this increased cyclic AMP was activating the protein kinase, and then gastric acid was being released from the proton pump. But prostaglandin, what it does, prostaglandin actually inhibits cyclic AMP. Okay, so if prostaglandin is inhibiting cyclic AMP, it will not stimulate the proton pump, because protein kinase will not get stimulated or activated, then also proton pump will not be activated. So while we were discussing the action of prostaglandin, first thing that I told you that prostaglandin inhibit the gastric acid secretion. Okay, apart from its action in producing the mucus or bicarbonate or increasing the mucosal blood flow. So one thing that you can do, you can promote the gastric defense mechanism by using gastroprotective prostaglandin such as PGE2 or PGI2. Because what we have seen, prostaglandin have got a very good role to play. So till now, what we have seen that we can use the drugs which decreases the gastric acid secretion. The other drug that we briefly discussed while we were discussing the strategies was the acid neutralizing agents such as antacids. The third drug is the cytoprotective agents such as sucralfate. Then also we have discussed about the role of prostaglandin analogs in the treatment of peptic ulcer. And do not forget the role of H. pylori. Anti-H. pylori drug have also got a very good role to play in the treatment of peptic ulcer. So if I tell you to classify the anti ulcer drug or anti-peptic ulcer drug, at least you will have a broad picture to recall, or you can easily elaborate, or you can easily tell about the various classes of peptic ulcer drugs. You don't need to mug up the things, or you just don't need to cram up the things. If you have a better understanding about the pathophysiological aspects, physiological aspects, you can easily understand the pharmacology. Okay. So this particular picture sums up the various things that we have discussed in today's class. Okay. So what are the various drug classes that can be used in the treatment of peptic ulcer? Yes, drugs that inhibit gastric acid secretions. Among this drug class, we have proton pump inhibitors, which will directly inhibit the proton pump, because proton pump is basically the final step from where the acid is being secreted. So you have directly stopped that proton pump. And in fact, proton pump inhibitors are one of the most efficacious, most effective drugs in the treatment of peptic ulcer. The other target that you can adopt is you can use anticholinergics. You can inhibit the acetylcholine induced gastric acid secretion. Okay, and how this acetylcholine was activating the gastric acid secretion? It was increasing the cytosolic calcium. Okay, and then increasing or then activating the protein kinase, and then proton pump was activated and gastric acid was secreted. Similarly, we talked about the role of histamine. Histamine, through its H2 receptor, it activates the cyclic AMP. Yes, it is increasing the cyclic AMP, and this increased cyclic AMP is activating the protein kinase, and then proton pump is getting activated or stimulated, and then acid is being secreted. But as far as role of prostaglandin is concerned, prostaglandin, what it is doing, prostaglandin is actually promoting the defensive factor. It is not stimulating the gastric acid secretion, rather it is inhibiting the gastric acid secretion, because it is inhibiting the cyclic AMP. So it is, prostaglandin is decreasing the gastric acid secretion, and also it is increasing the production of mucosa, it is increasing the production of mucosal blood flow, and yes, so by all these things, we have seen that prostaglandin have got a very good role to play in the treatment of peptic ulcer. So in the next class, we will discuss about the individual drug classes. We will start with proton pump inhibitors, and then we will move further and we will discuss in detail about the other drug classes, and also we will discuss about the anti-H. pylori drugs. So thank you.